Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here. It is time to fill and run the first 3 tanks in the new rack system. This is where we had left off. I had plumbed everything and gotten everything all set to fill up. But instead of just sticking a hose in this and filling it, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to calibrate the auto water change system. So what I've done is I've picked the smallest pump I had laying around, and it's going to be my guide to whether or not, well, obviously whether this is too strong or too weak or whatever to do the job. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to plumb it into the line, and then I'm going to see how long it takes for it to fill up each of the 3 tanks, and of course drain the barrel. And also want to see if as the barrel drains, whether there's a change in pressure, all those sorts of things. So I've turned it on now, and first off, I've noticed that obviously the first, the tank closest to the pump is going to get a bit more water than everything else, and that's definitely the case. These end pieces, if you remember from when I put them together, they're not glued into place. It's easy for me to swivel them, and also the little end caps that are drilled there, I can pull them out. Drill a bigger or smaller hole depending upon if I want more or less pressure in a given tank. And because this is simply the water change, it's not the filtrations. My biggest concern is, well, actually 2 things, I guess. First off, I don't want to shock the whatever's in the aquariums. I don't want to do a water change that's too quick. Now obviously later on, when this is actually a real water change, the water I'm going to have in the barrel is going to be adjusted for chemistry and temperature and that sort of stuff. But still, I really do want to keep this as stable as possible, so I want to find a kind of a happy mid-range here for how long this is going to take. Which actually brings me to the second point. I don't want this to take too long. The old rack system, I stick a hose in there and 5 minutes later the water change is done and I can go about my day. For this, I am going to have to stick around for at least a little while. I do a lot of work down here, so it's not too big a deal, but I don't want to be tied to this. So we are 30 minutes in. The surprising thing at this point is tank 2 and 3 here, they're almost identical, which is bizarre to me. Now, obviously the first tank's getting the lion's share. It's pretty much double the other 2, which is not unexpected, but it's kind of weird that these 2 are the same. So 30 minutes in, that's actually not that bad. Now 90 minutes, the barrel's pretty much done, and I figure about 2 hours, this will actually be completely finished. The thing is now, the water pressure has dropped quite a bit because, as the barrel drains, the head of water between the output and where the pump is getting greater. So the hydrostatic pressure is kind of wearing a bit on the pump, and it's slowing down a bit. But it's still running pretty good, but I think what I have to do here is raise the barrel up at least a little bit to mitigate that at least somewhat. And now I get to the fun part. I'm going to hook up the 2 box filters from the last couple of videos, and I'm going to get them in the tanks and get them running and get those tanks cycling so I can get to putting fish in and all that sort of stuff. I've chosen as the biomedia here just red lava rock. It's pretty much inert. I use it on a lot of my filtration. If later on I choose to make one of the tanks harder and more alkali, I will probably swap out one of them for crushed coral and that sort of stuff, just as a different kind of biomedia. Now I'm going to use polywool, not too big a surprise here. You could also use like a foam pad instead, but I wanted to use wool here because, it's nice and bright and white, so any dirt that's collected will be much easier to see, and because I'm testing these out, I want more of a visual marker for this sort of thing. Now, initially, I'm just going to put in 1 piece for each of the filters because, there's nothing in the tanks, so there's really nothing for them to do. So I'm just going to run 1 piece, and then as I start adding living things into it, I will probably double them up. And the last thing I need to do before I can run these filters is I need to figure out how I'm going to get the air to them. Now, I'm going to use a hard rigid tubing simply because it's quick and easy. Later on I'm going to have to decide whether or not that's sufficient, or I want to put an air stone on the end of these. I'm going to go through a series of tests and whatnot to see what gives me the best flow. And of course, depending on what's in the aquariums, they may need more or less. So all that stuff needs to be figured out later on. So I'm just going to start off with something that's going to get it going. And then what I'm going to do is my old rack system, the one that has been in pretty much every video that I've done so far, that used to be driven by air when I first set it up. The pump I use for that is just a little bit of overkill, I think, for running these two little these two little box filters. So what I had to do is I had to scrounge around and find a couple of small air pumps. I always keep a few around because if I want to shut off one of the tanks for babies or whatever, I need to be able to run an air pump and a sponge filter in them. So I thought I had 3, but as it turns out, only 2 of them are working. So here's the big pump, and I'm obviously not going to run that now, but it will be set up later on for when this actually is up and running fully. So I'm going to hook up these 2 small air pumps. Here they are hooked up here. And they're going to run these 2 tanks. I've filled them up obviously with water now. I just used a hose. But the far one over at the other end, I'm going to have to run it some other way for the time being because I don't have a 3rd pump. So what I'm going to do is probably use the water pump I used for the auto change. I'm just going to hook it up to a sponge filter, and I'm going to use that to get that tank cycling. I always keep a few sponge filters laying around, so just so I can have something that's got some bacteria on it and everything right off the bat, and it's just in case, like I said, things need to be isolated or whatever. So anyway, the first one's in. It's very nicely negatively buoyant, so it just sinks right to the bottom. I don't have to worry about putting any heavy rocks in. It's really quite cool. Also, while I was babbling away there, when I first put that in to the tank, you can see the water shoots up through those holes and goes a little waterfall over onto the polyester wool. And that's exactly what I was hoping for. It was kind of neat. So I'm going to get the air running on these and then let them cycle for a while. So this is probably going to be the last video for this rack system for at least a little bit, like a couple weeks anyway, because I have to get everything hooked up. And then hopefully I'll have some interesting stuff for you, because I do plan on doing a fair amount of breeding and experimentation and all that sort of stuff on at least even just these first 3 tanks. But I'm going to leave all that for another video, simply because, well, I want to tease you. So anyway, I got the air running. Sad thing is, well, at least they're running, but the one the closest to you here, that's just not enough air, and it's kind of unfortunate. The other one's actually quite good, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to probably have to hook up that big air pump earlier than expected. I'll have to see how that goes, simply because I want to keep these running as smoothly as possible. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like and or subscribe if you like this style of video. And I'm going to leave you off here with these 2 filters running. And like I said, it's just not enough flow. Especially for this particular one, I may swap out the 2 lines because this one is going to have a bit more suction to get water to come from underneath all the way up. There is flow of water there, but it's not enough. And this one here is actually just perfectly fine. Even if I had valved it, I probably would have chosen this sort of level of flow. So this one won't be an issue at all. Anyway, thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video, and bye for now.